welcome to this explainer. We tend to have this real sense of modern arrogance. We love to think that with all our fancy labs, our massive particle accelerators, and supercomputers, we're standing at the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. But what happens when we uncover inventions and constructions from thousands of years ago that literally baffle today's top scientists? Well, today we're going to look at ancient technologies that are so incredibly advanced, they simply shouldn't exist in the historical timelines we've built. And yet, here they are, staring us right in the face. Okay, let's dive into this. To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of what we're dealing with, just imagine archaeologists digging up a 9th century Viking burial mound, carefully brushing away the dirt, and finding a fully functioning modern laptop sitting right next to an iron broadsword. It's paradoxically impossible, right? It fundamentally breaks our entire understanding of technological progression. Well, that is exactly the feeling researchers get when they analyze the artifacts we're going to explore today. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the ancient analog computer. Second, the ultimate lost weapon. Third, materials we can't replicate. Fourth, impossible scale and precision. And fifth, what else is lost? Let's get right into it. Section 1, the ancient analog computer. Picture this. The year is 1901. A crew of Greek sponge divers is exploring a shipwreck off the coast of the island of Antikythera, a ship that went down way back around 65 BC. Down there, they find this lump of corroded bronze. It literally just sits in a museum for months until it dries out and cracks open, revealing dozens of interlocking, precision-cut tiny bronze gears. Guys, what they found was essentially an analog computer, over 2 millennia old. The Antikythera mechanism contained at least 30 bronze gears arranged in a complex system that could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the positions of the 5 planets known at the time, calculate the dates of the Olympic Games, and even model the irregular orbit of the moon. The insanely advanced mathematics required to run these astronomical models is just staggering. And what's even more mind-blowing is the sheer ambition of cramming all that processing power into a device roughly the size of a shoebox. Now, here is a number you really need to remember. After this device was built in 65 BC, humanity wouldn't create anything even remotely this mechanically complex for another 1,400 years. Think about that. The rest of the world wouldn't catch up to whoever built this until the Renaissance. And remember, this thing was found on a commercial shipwreck. It was just being casually transported across the Mediterranean. Kind of makes you wonder how many more of these ancient computers are sitting at the bottom of the ocean right now, doesn't it? Section 2. The ultimate lost weapon. All right, we're jumping forward to 672 AD, Constantinople. A massive Arab fleet is bearing down on the heavily outnumbered Byzantine Empire. The situation is looking totally grim until the Byzantine ships unleash something the world has quite literally never seen: Greek fire. It was this liquid fire projected from tubes that sprayed across the water like a giant flamethrower. It engulfed entire ships in seconds and completely decimated the invading fleet. Now, what's really interesting here is how the historically recorded properties of this weapon actively contradict each other from a modern chemistry standpoint. It was a liquid sprayed through tubes that ignited on contact with water, it stuck to surfaces, and it simply could not be put out. From a chemistry perspective, a substance that ignites on water shouldn't easily stick to surfaces while still maintaining a sprayable liquid state. Modern chemists have tried mixing everything: petroleum, pine resin, sulfur, quicklime, saltpeter, but no one has been able to match all these historical descriptions perfectly. The Byzantines used this as their ultimate superweapon for nearly 800 years. It was their most closely guarded state secret, known only to a tiny handful of people who were sworn to take it to their graves. And, well, they did exactly that. When Constantinople finally fell in 1453, the secret died with the empire. It is truly astounding to think about. The Byzantines took one of the most powerful weapons in all of human history and effectively erased it from existence. It's honestly a toss-up whether this was the absolute greatest act of military secrecy ever achieved, or just the single biggest fumble in the history of technology. Section 3. Materials we can't replicate. We kind of just assume that our modern materials are superior in every single way, right? Well, ancient swordsmiths and builders vastly outperformed our current capabilities, and a great example is the legendary Damascus steel. Sometime in the early Middle Ages, swordsmiths in the Middle East started making blades with this incredibly distinctive flowing water pattern. These swords were sharp. Sharp enough to slice a falling silk scarf clean in half just by the fabric's own weight. The specific forging technique for this was lost around 1750, but here's where it gets crazy. In 1991, modern science discovered carbon nanotubes, these microscopic cylindrical structures that are among the strongest materials known to humanity. We consider this absolute cutting-edge nanotechnology. Yet, in 2006, scientists put genuine Damascus steel under an electron microscope and found those exact same carbon nanotubes inside. We're building particle accelerators and landing robots on Mars today, but for sure, we still cannot purposefully replicate a sword forged by a blacksmith in a 12th century workshop. And it's not just metallurgy, it's basic, everyday construction. We literally pour billions of dollars into maintenance every single year because the modern concrete used on our highways and parking garages starts crumbling after, about 50 years? Meanwhile, you have the Pantheon in Rome, built in 125 AD with this massive, unreinforced concrete dome, and it has been standing for nearly 2,000 years through earthquakes, floods, and wars. It just quietly sits there, effortlessly flexing on every modern building we've constructed in the last century. So the crucial point here is that for centuries, nobody could explain why Roman concrete actually got stronger over time instead of weaker. Then, in 2023, MIT scientists discovered these tiny white chunks of lime in the concrete called limeclasts. We previously thought these were just, sloppy imperfections in their mixing process. Actually, scratch that, we were totally wrong. When crocs form and water seeps in, these limeclasts dissolve and recrystallize, automatically filling the cracks. Roman concrete literally self-heals. Seawater, the very thing that aggressively destroys our modern concrete, actually activates this built-in maintenance system, making Roman harbors and aqueducts stronger and stronger. Section 4, Impossible Scale and Precision. Okay, we're going to accelerate the pacing here for a rapid-fire look at a supporting cast of ancient mysteries that completely shatter our understanding of tech progression. First up, 170 square miles. That is the massive expanse of the Nazca Lines down in southern Peru. Around 500 BC, the Nazca people carved over 800 perfectly straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and these massive drawings of animals, like a 300-foot monkey and a 150-foot spider, right into the desert surface. The catch? These perfectly proportioned images are really only visible from the air. Without aircraft or hot air balloons, it is genuinely baffling how they preserved such flawless proportions across miles and miles of open desert. Moving way up into the Andes above Cusco, Peru, we find the walls of Sacsayhuaman. The Inca built this massive fortress with limestone blocks weighing up to 130 tons each. Not only did they drag these impossibly heavy stones up a mountain, but they fitted them together so perfectly, without a single drop of mortar or cement, that you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. This stone-on-stone, 3D interlocking puzzle has survived over 500 years of brutal earthquakes in one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Next is 1.1 volts. Around 250 BC in Mesopotamia, someone created what we call the Baghdad battery. These were small clay jars containing copper cylinders and iron rods. When scientists took a replica and filled it with a basic electrolyte like vinegar, it produced about 1.1 volts of electricity. This happened 1,800 years before Alessandro Volta officially invented the battery. You simply don't accidentally assemble copper, iron, and an electrolyte in that exact, suspiciously specific configuration. How about 50 nanometers? That is the exact size of the gold and silver nanoparticles embedded in the Roman Lycurgus cup from the 4th century AD. This drinking cup actually changes color. It's green in reflected light and blood red when it's lit from behind. The Romans embedded deliberate, incredibly precise nanotechnology into a glass cup centuries before we even understood how light interacts with metallic nanoparticles in the 20th century. Absolutely wild. And then there's the absolute mystery sitting right now in a vault at Yale University's library, the Voynich manuscript. Written in the early 1400s, it's a 240-page book completely filled with unknown botanical illustrations and bizarre astronomical charts. The text shows highly consistent linguistic patterns, which proves it's a real language, and not just some medieval gibberish, but it remains entirely unbroken. World War II cryptographers, the NSA, and even modern AI have all taken a crack at deciphering a single word of it, and every single one of them has totally failed. Finally, we wrap up this rapid-fire section at 12,800 feet above sea level with the Puma Punku Temple Complex in Bolivia. We are talking about H-shaped stone blocks with perfectly flat surfaces that are accurate to fractions of a millimeter. completely uniform drill holes, interlocking fits exactly like Lego bricks. And they did all of this using andesite and diorite, two of the hardest stones on the planet, all built by a civilization that had zero iron tools, no steel, and no known writing system. Modern engineers look at this site and openly admit they would seriously struggle to replicate this level of extreme precision even using today's heavy equipment.
Section 5. What else is lost?
So let's zoom out for a second. We have an ancient analog computer we can't rebuild, a Byzantine chemical weapon we can't recreate, medieval steel containing modern nanotubes, and Roman concrete that literally heals itself. It leaves us with one profoundly awe-inspiring question. What else has been lost? How many incredible discoveries were made, perfected, used for centuries, and then completely, utterly forgotten? How much did ancient civilizations truly know that we, with all our modern arrogance, are only just beginning to figure out again today? It really makes you think. The next time a diver pulls a corroded lump of metal from a shipwreck, we should probably pay very, very close attention.